Betrayal hurts most when it comes wearing a familiar face. Eva wasn't just betrayed by her husband. She was betrayed by the little sister she had protected, forgiven, and carried through life. Together, they tried to use guilt, family loyalty, and a fake unborn child to steal everything she had person. They called it healing. They called it being the bigger person. But Eva finally understood. The truth, some people don't want forgiveness. They want permission to keep destroying you. And this time, she said no.
They sat there, ready for me to sign away half my life to fund their betrayal. My husband and sister saw this dinner as a victory, but I slammed a thick envelope on the table and their smiles disappeared. It wasn't a settlement. It was a transcript of their secret life. I'd turned their little celebration into a private trial and I was the only judge. My name is Clara Reed. I'm 33. I'm a lead architect at Nexus Innovations in San Francisco. Tonight, in a booth at Aperture, I felt less like a tech executive and more like a convict on death row. This restaurant was painfully expensive. It was the kind of place with lighting so dim it was meant to hide the wrinkles on the city's old money patrons, and where the clink of silverware sounded like knives being sharpened. I watched a single drop of condensation trace a path down my water glass until it hit the white tablecloth. It left a dark, spreading stain, much like the rot that had been seeping into my world for 3 weeks. Across from me were the two architects of my misery. Marcus Thorne, my husband, was leaning forward, elbows on the table. He wore the earnest expression he used to pitch a buggy app to investors, praying they missed the fatal flaw. It was a look of rehearsed sincerity, a mask of honesty that never quite reached his eyes. Next to him was Sophie Reed, my younger sister. She had a glow, but it wasn't natural. It was the toxic shine of someone who thought she'd just pulled off the perfect crime. She wore a designer maternity dress, likely bought with the credit card I paid off. Her hand rested on her stomach in a dramatic, protective performance, caressing the small bump like it was a winning lottery ticket. They really thought they were here to discuss terms. That we were 3 civilized people having a polite dinner to end a marriage that had simply run its course. They had no idea I wasn't looking at family. I was looking at 2 defendants. Marcus cleared his throat, a sound that grated on my last nerve. He started his pitch. "Clara, listen," he began, his voice dropping to that confidential. Reasonable tone, he thought, made him sound mature. "We want this to be amicable. There's no reason to bring in lawyers and make this nasty or drag things out. It's better for everyone if we just keep this clean." He paused, expecting me to nod, to play the problem solver I had always been. When I just stared at the knot in a tie I'd bought him, he shifted uncomfortably and pushed on. "We've run the numbers," he started, that royal we, twisting a knife in my gut. "The only fair path is selling the Pacific Heights condo. We split it down the middle. It's a fresh start for both of us." He then mentioned the brokerage accounts, saying an even split was the only ethical choice since we built this life together. I almost choked. Built it. I remembered coding all night for a product launch while he streamed his music to an audience of 3. I thought about the budget plan I designed to erase his $50,000 in student loans, but my expression was a perfect blank slate. Then Leo added, flicking his eyes to Sophie before meeting mine with fake reluctance. "And with the baby, and Sophie unable to, create content for a bit, I think some temporary alimony is probably for the best. Just for 2 years until we're settled with the little one. It's my child, Clara. I have a responsibility." He said it with such conviction. My child, as if his cheating was some noble burden he was carrying, not a knife he had buried in my back. Then Sophie took her turn. She leaned in, her eyes wide and glistening with that fake vulnerability she perfected as a child. She started to reach for my hand, but froze when she saw the ice in my eyes. She pulled back and went to stroking her stomach again. "Clara, please understand," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We never wanted to hurt you. It just happened. You're so strong." "You've always been the strong one. You have your career at Nexus, your reputation. You don't need the money the way we do." She looked at Marcus with a gaze of sickening adoration before turning back to me. "Think about the baby, your niece or nephew. You wouldn't want them to start out struggling, would you?" Mom and Dad are so worried. If you just settle this tonight, sign the papers so we can have the start we need, we can all heal. You can save this family. You can be the bigger person. The bigger person. The words echoed in my skull. Be the bigger person so they could stay the small, greedy parasites they truly were. I watched as Marcus's thumb brushed Sophie's wrist under the table, a secret touch that used to be mine. I saw how Sophie couldn't look me in the eye, focusing instead on my chin or my forehead. I registered their confidence. They were so sure about me. They were certain Clara Reed would do what she always did, fix the problem, pay the bill, and bear the pain in silence so everyone else could be comfortable. They were betting on my pride, assuming I'd pay anything to make this humiliation disappear. They were right about one thing. I was willing to pay a very high price, but it wasn't for silence. The restaurant noise faded to a low hum against the sharp clarity of my rage. I hadn't touched my wine. I hadn't picked up my fork. Slowly, deliberately, I reached down for the leather tote bag by my feet. The motion caught their eyes. They probably expected a checkbook or a pen to sign the pathetic agreement Marcus had printed and placed by his water glass. Instead, I pulled out a heavy, legal-sized manila envelope. It was so thick the clasp was straining to stay shut. I didn't slide it across the table. I lifted it and brought it down hard in the center of the tablecloth. Thud. The sound was heavy, final, a gavel strike made of paper. Marcus jumped. The ice in his drink rattled. Sophia's smile died, her hand freezing on her belly. The air at our table dropped 10 degrees. A waiter, who was approaching with a bread basket, saw the look on my face and wisely retreated into the shadows. I placed my hands on the table, lacing my fingers together, and finally looked Marcus straight in the eye. I saw the first crack in his confident facade. I saw Sophie swallow hard, her eyes darting from the envelope to me, the certainty draining from her face. "Before we talk about splitting anything," I said, my voice low and perfectly steady, "there is one thing you two have forgotten, and it's that one thing that will decide tonight. Not my future, but yours." The restaurant went out of focus. Their faces started to fade as my mind pulled me away, back down that agonizing hallway of time. Back to the moment the ground gave way beneath me. Back to 3 weeks ago, when I actually thought I still had a family. 3 weeks ago, the world was a different colour. It was bright, sharp, and filled with the golden promise I had chased for the last decade. I was standing in the corner office at Nexus Innovations, looking out at the San Francisco skyline through floor-to-ceiling glass, as the words washed over me, "Lead architect." It wasn't just a promotion. It was the reward for every missed birthday, every all-nighter spent fixing bugs, and every weekend sacrificed to demanding project timelines. The new compensation package was staggering. A salary increase that made my head spin, a bonus that could pay off our mortgage in 3 years, and stock options that would set us up for retirement before we hit 40. I walked out of that office feeling like I was floating. My first instinct, a reflex that would soon become my biggest regret, was to share this win with the people I loved. My fingers were trembling as I pulled out my phone and called Marcus. I could hear a TV show in the background, but I pushed past it. I told him to clear his night. I called Sophie next. I told them both to meet me at Aperture. I told them this was the most important night of my life. I told them to get whatever they wanted, the most expensive bottle of wine, the best steak, because tonight it was all on me. Tonight we were celebrating the fact that we had finally made it. I got to the restaurant 30 minutes early. I needed everything to be perfect. I wore a deep green silk dress I'd bought on a whim months ago, saving it for a day that truly mattered. It fit just right, making me feel powerful and elegant. I sat in our booth, watching the door, picturing how the night would go. I imagined the look of pride on Marcus's face. I saw him raising a champagne flute, saying he always knew I had it in me. I saw Chloe, my sweet, dramatic little sister, getting misty-eyed and hugging me, joking that she finally had a rich sister to buy her art supplies. The picture in my head was perfect. Then the front door opened, and the whole image started to bleed. They walked in together. That was the first little crack in the masterpiece, but I chose to ignore it. They didn't show up one after the other. They came through our apartment door as a single unit, moving with a matched pace that felt practiced. And Chloe was dressed for a gala, not a quiet Tuesday night celebration at home. Her makeup was flawless, a dark, smoky eye that felt too intense for our living room, and her hair fell in perfect, glossy curls. She was holding Ethan S. arm, not like a friend, not like a sister-in-law navigating an unfamiliar hallway, but gripping it. Her fingers were tight around his bicep, digging into his suit jacket. Ethan looked off too. He kept adjusting his cuffs, a nervous habit he only had when he was about to ask for a loan. When I waved, my face stretched into a huge grin. He didn't smile back. He looked at the rug. He looked at the bookshelf. He looked anywhere but at me. They sat on the sofa across from me, so close that their knees were touching. I felt a cold warning deep in my bones, that old instinct that tells you a predator is near, but my logical mind was too busy celebrating to pay attention. I gestured to the champagne. "Pour yourselves a glass," I said, my voice buzzing. "Seriously, this is the good stuff. We're celebrating." "Celebrating what exactly?" Ethan asked. His voice was strained, brittle. I launched into the story anyway. I told them about making senior partner. I told them about my new title. I painted a picture of the massive new class action lawsuit I'd be leading. I was practically glowing, waiting for them to catch that energy, but the spark died before it could cross the coffee table. Instead of applause, I got a deposition. So Ethan cut in right as I was describing the complexities of the case. That pay increase, is it immediate? And the partnership bonus you mentioned, is that paid out now or is it tied to the firm's annual performance? I just blinked, thrown by the sudden shift into a financial audit. "It's a mix," I told him, "but the base salary increase hits next month. It's a huge jump, Ethan. We can finally start looking at that summer house on the Cape we talked about." "And the firm equity?" Chloe chimed in, her voice sharp as a needle. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the engagement ring on my finger. "Is that held in your name alone, or is it a marital asset? How would that work if, the firm ever got acquired? And the condo?" Ethan added, leaning forward, his eyes suddenly laser-focused. "With your new income, does that change the ownership structure, or is it still protected by that trust you set up?" The questions felt like ice water on a sunburn. They weren't my family celebrating a win. They were opposing counsel looking for weaknesses. I could see a raw greed in their eyes, a hungry, calculating look I'd never noticed before, or maybe I had, and I'd just been too in love to recognize it. "Why are we talking about this now?" I asked, trying to laugh it off. "We're set. That's the whole point. We're finally secure." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Chloe glanced at Ethan. It was a loaded look. A silent message passed between them like seasoned criminals. Ethan took a slow, deep breath, like someone steeling himself to do something terrible, and he gave her a tiny nod. Chloe reached out and placed her hand over Ethan's. Right there on the sofa, directly in my line of sight. She laced her fingers through his and squeezed. Then she looked right at me. A sad little smile on her face, the kind of look a doctor gives you before delivering bad news. "We have some news too, Ava," Chloe said. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "I have a little surprise. I'm pregnant." My brain just stopped working. "Pregnant? Chloe, that's who's the father?" "You haven't dated anyone in months." She didn't have to answer. She just tightened her grip on Ethan's hand. I looked down at their joined hands on the cushion. Then I looked at Ethan's face. He was a pale, sickly grey, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. "It's mine," Ethan whispered. Every sound in the room, the distant wail of a siren on the street, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the jazz station playing softly from the kitchen, it all just vanished. The world went completely silent. All I could hear was the frantic pounding of my own heart, a roaring in my ears. "What?" The word formed on my lips, but I couldn't make a sound. "It's Ethan's," Chloe repeated, and her voice was stronger now, shifting from shaky confession to solid defiance. "We fell in love, Ava. It wasn't something we planned. It just happened. We fought it. We really did. But this connection is just too real, and now there's a baby coming a part of our family." I just sat there, frozen, My hands felt like they were glued to the armrests of my chair. I felt disconnected from my own body, like my mind had ejected itself to save me from the impact. Ethan finally met my eyes, and they were begging for a forgiveness I didn't have. It started when you were spending all those late nights at the firm on the Henderson case. He said, the words tumbling out. I was lonely. Chloe was here. She just gets me. She listens in a way you haven't had time for in years. Ava, it was a mistake at first, but it became something real. We couldn't hide it from you anymore, Chloe said, her hand drifting down to rest on her stomach. Especially not now. We have to do what's right for the baby. And then came the proposal, the business proposition for my own surrender. Ava, Ethan said, slipping back into that calm negotiating tone he used. You're a success. You just made partner. You have your whole career ahead of you. We're just starting out. We want to be a real family. We want to raise this child in a stable home. So we think the fairest thing, the most decent thing, would be for you to give us a quiet divorce. Think of your image, Chloe added, her voice dropping. You're a senior partner at a major law firm now. You don't want a messy public scandal about your husband and your own sister. It would look terrible for your career. If you just sign everything over, if you let us have the condo and a generous portion of the assets to begin our life, we can handle this privately. You can be the cool, supportive aunt. You could be the hero who stepped aside for the good of a child. They kept talking. They used words like dignity and fairness and what's best for everyone. But I wasn't hearing them anymore. I looked down at the new silk blouse I'd bought to celebrate the biggest achievement of my life, and I realized with a sudden, chilling clarity that this wasn't a party. It was a hostile takeover. They hadn't come to celebrate my new life. They'd come to claim it for themselves. I sat there, paralyzed, while the ice in our glasses slowly melted, a silent witness to the fact that the woman who lived here had just died, and in her place a new, colder woman was being born. This was the night I was meant to have it all. Instead, it was the night they tried to strip me of everything, or so they thought. To understand how my husband and sister could sit across from me in my own living room and demand my life as severance for their affair, you need to know our history. This story didn't start in a Boston brownstone. It started in a cramped, crooked house in a dying Pennsylvania mill town, where the air always tasted like rust and failure. Our parents were decent people, the way people who are too bone-tired to be anything else are decent. They each worked multiple jobs just to keep the heat on and the bank from foreclosing. My father loaded cargo trucks and my mother was a cashier at a diner. They were perpetually exhausted, with a greyish tint to their skin, and they loved us as much as they knew how. But in our house, love was a scarce commodity, just like money, and early on a decision was made that Chloe just needed more of it than I did. I was the oldest, I was the responsible one. I was the one who taught myself to make pasta and sauce at 10 years old so Mom could catch an extra hour of sleep. By the time I was 16, I was working 30 hours a week at a convenience store, and every payday I'd put half my cash in the chipped coffee mug on the counter without a word. Chloe was different. She was 4 years younger, born with huge, sad eyes and a disposition my mother called sensitive. While I was stocking shelves with motor oil and junk food, Chloe was encouraged to explore her passions. She needed cello lessons. She needed special sketch pads. She needed a ride to the movies because taking the bus gave her anxiety. I remember the exact moment I understood my role in this family was to be the kindling that kept Chloe's fire going. It was the day of my interview for a full academic scholarship to college. It was my only way out. I'd studied for months, polished my application essays, and saved every tip I made to buy one good suit. It was a simple black pantsuit, professional, and at $75, it was the most expensive thing I'd ever owned. I was standing in front of the peeling mirror in our hallway, trying to tame my hair, my heart thumping against my ribs. Chloe came up behind me. She was 12, pouty and bored because my interview meant no one was free to drive her to a friend's house. "Let me fix your jacket," she said, reaching for my lapel. But she didn't fix it. Her hand, holding a half-eaten lollipop, accidentally smeared a sticky red line right down the front of my white shirt. She didn't just tug it, she yanked. A sharp, violent pull that ripped through the quiet hallway. I heard the fabric tear before I felt the cold air on my back. I spun around, my hand flying to the gaping hole where the zipper used to be. "Oops," my sister Mia said, her voice completely deadpan. Her eyes held no surprise, just a weird, flat satisfaction. I screamed, a raw sound of panic I couldn't hold back. My mother ran in from the kitchen, a dish towel in her hands. She saw the ruined dress, but she didn't yell at Mia. She didn't even ask what happened. She just looked at me, her face hardening with pure annoyance. "Claire, don't you have a backup? You know things happen. Why are you always so unprepared?" I yelled back, tears burning my eyes. "She ripped it! On purpose!" Mia instantly dissolved into theatrical sobs, her small body shaking. "I was just trying to help," she wailed. "I'm so clumsy I ruin everything, and Claire hates me." Instantly, my Mother S expression melted. She pulled Mia into a hug, stroking her hair. "It's okay, sweetie. You're not clumsy. Claire is just stressed out. She didn't mean to snap at you." Then, over Mia S' head, her gaze met mine, and her eyes were like chips of ice. "Use a safety pin, put on a jacket, and stop upsetting your sister. She's delicate." That was always the story. I was the rock you can drop a rock and it won't break. Mia was the glass fragile, precious, and if she shattered, it was always the fault of whoever was holding her. I went to my scholarship interview with a pin digging into my back. I got it, not out of confidence, but out of pure desperation. I left Michigan for college and I didn't look back. But that safety pin was lodged in my soul for years. School was my escape, but you can't outrun your childhood that easily. Then, in my junior year, I met Alex. He was charismatic, buzzing with big tech ideas, and he looked at me like I was the only thing that mattered. I was so desperate for someone to finally take care of me, to see me as more than just reliable, that I let him all the way in. I trusted him with everything. I'd leave my wallet on the table. I even believed him when he said he needed my social security number for a background check on an apartment we were getting together. I learned the truth from a collection agency that called me during an economics class. Alex had opened 3 credit cards in my name, racking up $7,000 on gadgets, fancy dinners with other women, and a spring break trip to Mexico I definitely wasn't on. When I confronted him, he cried. The same crocodile tears as Mia. He was a mess. He was struggling. He thought I'd get it because I was always so strong. That S, when I learned trust, can be used as a weapon. Paying off that $7,000 took me 2 years. I worked doubles at a campus diner on 4 hours of sleep, living off instant noodles and selling my textbooks back. I paid back every single dime, and the day that balance hit 0, I made myself a promise. No one was ever getting near my finances again. I built a fortress around my money, with walls of spreadsheets, savings goals, and eventually Northwind Solutions LLC. And then I met Mark. I told myself he was different. He wasn't smooth like Alex. He was a freelance marketing guy, a little rough around the edges, with a messy history and a smile that felt like home. He was honest about his flaws. On our 3rd date, he told me he had $40,000 of debt. He put it all out there. I mistook his confession for integrity. I didn't see that honesty without change is just an announcement. I fell for him because he seemed to need me, but in a good way, not like my family. He celebrated my ambition. He bragged about my work. I thought I'd finally found a real partner. I broke my one rule. I used my annual bonus to pay off his entire debt, calling it an investment in us. But I kept my guard up. I had him sign a formal loan agreement. I kept my business separate. I listened to my lawyer friend, Jenna, even when Mark called me paranoid. But as I was building our life, Mia was always in the background, a ghost haunting the edges of my happiness. Mia never grew up. She just bounced from one artistic venture to the next. Paid for first by our parents, then by me. Whenever she was broke, my mother would call and I'd send the money. It was just easier than the guilt trip, but my resentment festered. I'd see it in the jealous way she stared at my new car. I'd hear it in her snide remarks at holidays. "Must be nice," she'd say, sipping the expensive wine I bought. Some of us have souls to worry about, not just profit margins. I saw it way too late. My money never bought her gratitude. It only fueled her sense of entitlement. Over time, Mia started seeing my success not as mine, but as a family resource she was entitled to. My bank account became her personal trust fund, and my long hours were just the engine that kept it full. She didn't go after Mark because she loved him. I knew that, sitting there, remembering how she used to eye my favourite toys, my best outfits, my entire life. She went after Mark because he was the one asset she couldn't ask me to wire to her account. She did it to prove that the perfect, successful sister had a fatal flaw. She wanted to shatter the one thing I'd built that couldn't be quantified on a balance sheet. And the baby? That was just her ultimate checkmate. The ripped dress all over again. I messed up. It was an accident. So fix it, Claire. Give us the house. Give us the money. Be the bigger person. But they forgot something crucial. I wasn't that 16-year-old girl anymore. I was done patching myself up with safety pins while they held the damn scissors. I looked at the smugness on my sister S face and the pathetic, greedy hope in my husband's eyes, and I felt it snap. The very last thread of obligation. My whole life, I'd paid for their mistakes. Tonight they were going to start paying for mine. I met Mark at Chicago O'Hare during a blizzard, stranded at a departure gate. It felt like a modern-day purgatory. We were two strangers, staring at a screen where the word delayed glowed in angry red letters. I was frantically typing on my phone, trying to reschedule a logistics meeting, while he sat a few seats down, casually eating pretzels like he had all the time in the world. He started a conversation about the hideous airport carpet. It was a dumb opening line, but he said it with this crooked, boyish smile that just cut right through my stress. He was a freelance consultant from the suburbs, a guy in a comfortable sweater who had a warmth I was starving for in my cold, sterile world. He told me he was returning from a failed marketing pitch he'd poured his heart into. He spun it like a noble tragedy, a brave fight against a tough market. Not what it really was, a bad idea with worse planning. But I fell for the story. I saw a project, something I could fix, a life I could organize and make successful. 6 months later, when we got serious, the financial truth of Mark hit me like a ton of bricks. We were in my apartment when he admitted that his failed ventures had left him with over $40,000 in credit card debt. He gave me those same puppy dog eyes that had charmed me at the airport and said he was drowning. The interest payments were killing him. And I did what I always do. My spreadsheet brain took over. I didn't walk away. I didn't lecture him. Instead, I thought about my year-end bonus from Keystone Logistics. Money I'd been saving for a down payment on a condo. I made a choice. I would rescue him, but I wasn't naive. I still had the scars from Alex's $7,000 lesson. So I called my friend Jenna. Jenna was my college roommate, now a total shark of a lawyer in New York. When I told her my plan, she yelled at me for a solid 10 minutes. But when she saw I wouldn't budge, she sent over a file. It was a personal loan agreement, stating the $42,000 was a formal loan, not a gift. It was repayable on demand if we ever broke up. That night, over a cheap bottle of wine, I put the papers in front of him. "I want to help you," I said, sliding the document across the coffee table. "I can clear this, but I need you to sign this. It's just for my own peace of mind." Mark stared at the papers and then at me. He let out a nervous laugh. "A contract? Babe, seriously?" "We're in love. This is what billionaires do to their mistresses," he scoffed. "It's protection, Mark," I said, keeping my voice firm. "For both of us. It just keeps things from getting messy." He groaned, rolling his eyes as he grabbed a pen. "You and your paperwork. God, you're so intense, Claire. Fine, whatever makes you happy." He signed it without reading a single word. He didn't check the interest rate, the repayment clause, nothing. He just wanted the money. He scrawled his name with a little flourish, like he was signing an autograph, not handing over all his financial power. 2 years after that, right before our wedding, I bought us a condo in the Gold Coast. It was a stunning place, a corner penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Austin skyline. It radiated success. It was the home I'd fantasized about back in Nebraska while scanning groceries. But I didn't put Liam's name on any of the paperwork. My friend Zara had visited, and over a very intense brunch, she structured Chloe Holdings LLC for me. "You're the one earning the real money," Zara said, slicing her avocado toast with surgical precision. "He's an artist, and that world is unpredictable. You're buying this with your startup capital. Put it in an SLC. Make yourself the only member. If he gets sued, or totals a car, or gets into a fight, the penthouse is protected. And if you get divorced, it isn't marital property, it's a corporate asset." A little pang of guilt hit me. I was hedging my bets on a marriage that hadn't even begun. But then I thought about the $20,000 my ex cost me, and I signed the documents. Liam despised the LLCC. "Why can't it just be Mr. and Mrs. Hayes?" He whined as we moved his gear into the apartment. "Chloe Holdings sounds so sterile. This is our home, Chloe, not a transaction." "It's for liability protection." I lied. Well, it was a half-lie. Zara said it's the smartest way to manage the taxes. "Whatever," he muttered, carrying a case of his guitars into our new living room. "As long as I've got a key and fast Wi-Fi, call it anything you want." He never asked to review the operating agreement. He never asked about the ownership structure. I paid all the bills, and he was content to live like a permanent guest in a luxury hotel. Then, after the wedding, Maya showed up. My sister claimed Nebraska was crushing her artistic soul. She announced she was moving to Austin to find herself and build a career as a social media influencer, whatever that meant. Finding herself apparently required sleeping on my expensive Italian sofa for 3 weeks straight. She was a tornado of chaos in my perfectly arranged life. She left makeup stains on the towels and drank all the organic juice I used for my smoothies. And she flirted with my husband. It wasn't obvious at first. It was little inside jokes. It was playful arguments that went on just a bit too long. It was how she would lounge at the other end of the couch while he played guitar, wearing shorts that were way too small, laughing way too hard at his clumsy lyrics. "You guys are so serious," she'd say, looking at me while I sat at the table with my laptop, finishing a presentation on a Sunday. "Chloe, come on!" "Put the work away. Liam is trying to be creative. You're so rigid, you're like a human spreadsheet." Liam would just laugh. "She's the breadwinner. Maya, you gotta respect the hustle." But I could hear the resentment in his voice, a subtle jab implying my hard work was a drag, not the very reason he was sitting in a climate-controlled penthouse with a 60-inch TV. I bit my tongue. I told myself this was just how family was. Maya was the free spirit, I was the responsible one. Liam was just a good brother-in-law. I was the problem. I was too uptight. Then came the credit card statement. Liam was supposedly at an all-night recording session. Maya was supposedly at some yoga retreat. I was home working through a pile of company invoices. A charge caught my eye, the Driscoll Hotel, from a Tuesday afternoon. I felt a cold dread creep into my chest. I opened our shared cloud drive where he uploaded his business receipts, and there it was. I stared at the screen, a charge for a hotel room only miles from our home. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I waited for him to come home. I showed him the receipt. Liam looked at the paper, then at me, looking tired and irritated. He let out a deep sigh. "Chloe, you're being crazy," he said. Her influencer friend bailed on paying for a sponsored post they did at the hotel. She called me in a panic, stuck with the bill. I used our card to cover it so she wouldn't have a total meltdown. That's what she didn't want you to know. She knows you'd lecture her about being so naive. He looked at me with such genuine exhaustion, so disappointed I'd accuse him of that. "The last thing I want to do is clean up your sister's financial messes, but I did it because she's family." And this is the thanks I get. I wanted to believe him. I had to believe him. The alternative that my husband and my sister were betraying me right under my roof was simply too monstrous to consider. It would mean my entire life was a lie. So I chose his convenient story over the terrifying truth. I apologized. I went to bed. A week later, Zara was in town for a legal summit. I told her about Maya, the hotel charge, and Liam's excuse. Zara put down her fork. She looked at me with eyes that had seen countless divorces up close. "Chloe," she said, her voice low and serious. You need a post-nuptial agreement. We'll update the asset schedule. We'll make everything ironclad. A post-nup? I laughed nervously. Zara, it's fine! He explained it. If I demand a post-nup, he'll know I don't trust him. That would destroy our marriage. That marriage might already be destroyed, honey. You just haven't seen the wreckage yet, Zara said grimly. Just get it done. Call it estate planning. Say it's a new requirement from your company's investors. Blame the corporate attorneys. Just get his name on a document that confirms what's yours is yours. You are so cynical, I said, shaking my head. What is the worst that can happen? Maya isn't going to run off with him. The worst case, she becomes a permanent roommate and I have to buy twice as much food. Zara looked at me, and for the first time I could remember, she didn't fight back. She just looked sad. Okay, Chloe, but I'm drafting it anyway, and I want you to put it somewhere safe, just in case. I took the file she sent me a week later. I had Liam sign it one evening when he was in a great mood because I'd just bought him a vintage Fender guitar. I told him it was just some extra insurance paperwork for the LLCs. He signed it with a careless scribble, kissed my cheek, and went back to playing. I put the papers in the safe and forgot all about them. I thought I was being paranoid. I thought I was just being uptight, Chloe, the spreadsheet who happened to be a person. I had no idea I'd just loaded the weapon I would need 3 years later at the agave table. I didn't know that the worst thing wasn't Maya moving in. It was Maya moving in, taking my husband, and trying to take the entire life I had so carefully built to protect us. I paid the dinner bill. It was a reflex, a motion perfected over a decade of being the person who handled everything. While Maya sat there, dabbing her eyes with a napkin about the miracle of it all, and Liam stared at his steak like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar, I raised my hand. I signaled the waiter. I handed him my corporate card. The machine beeped, a sharp electronic sound that was like my heart flatlining in the sudden silence. I added a generous tip. I signed the receipt. I did it all with the calm precision of a robot whose primary functions were still running even after its core programming had been erased. They watched me do it. Neither of them made a move for a wallet. Neither offered to split the bill for the meal where they had just served me my own broken life on a plate. They just let me pay. That was the moment, more than the pregnancy news, that I knew exactly who I was to them. I stood up. My legs felt unsteady, like I was learning to walk again. I'm leaving, I said. My voice sounded empty, like it was echoing down a long hall. Chloe, wait, Liam said, getting to his feet. We should go home together. We need to figure out the logistics. Logistics? I repeated. It was a word from my world, a word I used to love. Now it just sounded obscene. I walked right out of the agave table without a second glance. The valet brought my car around, the sleek Tesla I'd bought myself after our last round of funding. Liam slid into the passenger seat before I could hit the lock. Maya stood on the curb, clutching a stomach, watching us with wide, tragic eyes like a scene from a bad movie. I merged into the Austin traffic. The city lights were a blur of red and white streaks as a light rain began to fall. The windshield wipers swished back and forth, back and forth. It was the only sound in the car for 5 long blocks. Chloe, say something, Liam begged. He reached out to touch my arm, but I flinched away so hard the car veered. He snatched his hand back as if he'd been burned. It's not what you think, he started. And the script was so predictable I felt a wave of nausea. It just started. You were in Seattle, then you were in New York. I was here. Maya was here. We were both just lonely. We were comforting each other. And then we slipped. Things just spun out of control. Slipped. He said the word like he'd tripped on a patch of ice, as if sleeping with my sister and getting her pregnant was just a simple accident, a minor loss of balance, not 1,000 conscious decisions made over and over for months. You slipped, I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. I didn't recognize it. You took off your clothes. You got into her bed. You made a baby, I asked. Which part of that was an accident, Leo? Clara, do not, he whined, squinting in the passenger seat. I get lonely. You are always at the office, married to your code. Sophie was there. She gets me. My knuckles went white on the steering wheel. He was actually blaming me. sitting in the Tesla I bought, in the designer jacket I paid for, saying his affair was my fault because I worked too hard. We came to a stoplight on an empty street. Yellow, red. I hit the brake, a perfect silent stop. I clicked my seatbelt open. The click echoed in the silent car. I turned and just looked at him, really saw him. The soft jaw I once called sensitive, the darting eyes I once thought were bashful. I saw a man built from excuses and need. "Get out," I said. Leo just blinked. "What? We are nowhere near the loft." I said, "Get out." I reached over and popped his door lock. "This is your stop. You and Sophie are a family now, right? You need to provide for her, so go on. Ask her where you are crashing tonight, because it will not be in my home." "Clara, it is foggy and cold," he sputtered, staring out at the damp street. "Be real. Just take me home so I can grab my stuff." "You have feet," I said. "Start walking." I just stared until it finally dawned on him that I was serious. He muttered a curse, slammed the car door, and just stood there on the corner, looking pathetic in the glow of the street light. I waited for the green, then I drove. I watched him get smaller in the mirror until he was just a smudge I would finally wiped clean. The rest of the drive is a total blur. I do not remember parking the car or taking the elevator to the 35th floor. I just remember opening the door to my apartment, my sanctuary, and feeling like I had stepped into a mausoleum. I dropped my bag on the marble island, and my constantly buzzing phone lit up the entire room. I glanced at the screen. 15 missed calls from my mother, 4 from my dad, and a dozen texts from Sophie. I picked up the phone, my thumb hovering. I knew it was a terrible idea. Nothing good would come from answering. But that deep, ingrained instinct to be the fixer, the one who handles everything, it was too powerful to ignore. I called my mom. She picked up immediately. "No, hello, no, are you all right?" "Just sobbing." "Clara," she cried, "thank goodness. Sophie is a complete wreck. She just called me, said you abandoned them, that you threw Leo out in the cold. How could you do that?" "She is pregnant, Clara. She is carrying your family." I stood there in my dark kitchen, listening to my own mother defend the sister who just destroyed my marriage. "Mom," my voice trembled. "She slept with my husband. They want me to divorce him so they can start their perfect life." "Are you listening to yourself?" I know, Mom wept. "It is awful. But you know how she is. She is delicate. You are the strong one, Clara. You can take it." Sophie's guilt is just tearing her apart. And Leo, well, he is the father. You have to think about the baby. Family is family, no matter what. Those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. You can handle pain. That was my life sentence. Since I could bear it, I was expected to. Because Sophie was fragile, she got to be rescued. "They want me to sell my condo," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "They want half of everything I have earned." "Well," Mom sniffled, her tone changing, becoming cautious but firm. "Maybe that is not so crazy. Not half, of course. But, Clara, they will need support. A baby is expensive, and with your new position, you have more than enough. Would it be so awful to help them with a down payment, just to get them on their feet? For the baby. You would not want your niece or nephew growing up in some tiny apartment, would you?" I pulled the phone away from my face and just stared. She wanted me to pay for their treachery. She wanted me to finance the life they had just stolen from me. "Clara, are you still there?" Mom's voice sounded small and far away. "Please, sweetie, be the bigger person. For me, this fighting will be the death of me." I hung up. No goodbye, no argument. I just hit the red icon and let the phone clatter onto the countertop. I went to the cupboard for a glass. I filled it at the sink, my hands shaking, my movements clumsy. I tried to take a drink, but the water would not go down. I just stood there, clutching the glass. I squeezed it tighter, then tighter still. I needed to feel something besides this hollow ache inside me. I wanted it to shatter. I wanted to feel the sting, to see the blood, just to prove I was still alive. Standing there by my state-of-the-art fridge, I realized none of them had ever really loved me. I was not a person, I was a portfolio, an insurance plan, a safety net. They loved that I was tough because it let them be weak. They loved my salary because it let them be lazy. They loved my forgiveness because it meant they never had to grow up. It hit me then. I was never a wife or a sister to them. I was just a resource a bank account with a heartbeat, and the bank was officially closed. I slid down to the cold kitchen floor, my back against the cabinet, the glass still in my hand, my grip loosened just enough. The adrenaline from the confrontation and the long drive home started to fade out, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. I just sat there for hours, watching the numbers on the oven clock flip over. 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Gradually, the sky outside my massive windows started to shift. The pitch black softened to a deep purple, then a hard, metallic grey. The sun was rising over the bay. Light started creeping into the kitchen, highlighting the disaster of my evening. My designer dress was a wrinkled mess. My makeup was surely a wreck. I was alone in a silent condo that suddenly felt way too big. But when the first real sliver of sunlight struck the hardwood floors, something changed inside me. The wave of tears I was bracing for never came. The breakdown my friend warned me about did not happen. Instead, a cold, sharp clarity washed over me like putting on armor. I looked at my hands. Shaking, yes, but they were mine. I looked around the room. It was mine. I thought about my career, the one I built line by line of code while they were all just playing games. For 34 years, I had been the rescuer. I saved my parents from foreclosure. I saved Sophie from her bad decisions. I saved Leo from his own debt. My whole life I had been tossing life rafts to people who could swim just fine but found it easier to just float along on my effort. Not anymore. I set the glass down on the floor. I pushed myself up. My knees cracked and my muscles screamed. But I stood tall. This time I was not saving anyone. This time I would let them sink. And for the first time ever I was swimming to shore for myself. By 7 a.m. I was at my dining table with a cold coffee and my phone. The crying woman on the floor was gone. I was a lead architect, and this was just a system failure that needed a fix. I called Maya Singh. She answered on the second ring, her voice already sharp and focused, free of the usual morning fog. She was a partner at a big Silicon Valley law firm, billing at $800 an hour. This call was free, but the advice was priceless. "Clara," she said, "it is early. Please tell me you are finally suing that incompetent developer." "Leo is having an affair with Sophie," I said, my voice completely level. It was the same tone I used to tell a client their entire server farm just went offline. They want a divorce, they want the condo sold, and all the assets split. The line went silent for exactly 3 seconds and... "Go on," Maya said. No shock, no sympathy. Just a request for more information. I kept going, laying out their demands and the timeline Leo gave me. I described the argument in the car, treating my marriage's collapse like a post-mortem on a failed project. Then I paused, took a shaky breath, and said, "Sophie says she is pregnant, and she claims it is Leo's." That's when the mask shattered. My voice cracked on the word child. A sharp, ugly sob escaped before I could slap a hand over my mouth. "Okay," Nora said. Her tone didn't get softer. It got harder, like steel. "Stop right there! We are finished with the crying part. We are now in the planning phase. Eva, you listen to me. Don't talk to them. Don't text them. Don't answer your mother. Go to your safe. The one in the floor of your closet," Nora ordered. "The one you had installed. The one where I told you to keep an emergency file. Go. Now." I walked into our bedroom. It smelled like Blake's cologne. It was the smell of his cologne, a scent I once loved. Now it just made me sick. I walked into our master closet, shoving past his tailored suits and a ridiculous rack of sneakers, and lifted a corner of the carpet. I punched in the code my own birthday, how ironic, and the hidden safe clicked open. Under a dusty velvet box holding my grandmother's pearls was a heavy plastic file organizer. "I've got it," I said to Zara, putting my phone on speaker. "Okay, open it," she replied, her voice tinny. "What's in there?" I pulled out the documents. My hands were trembling, but my head was starting to feel clear. Here it is, the deed to the penthouse. It's in the name of Vanguard Properties, my company. I have the articles of incorporation, and the personal loan agreement for the $50,000 I gave Marcus to pay off his art gallery's creditors. "Good," Zara said. "And the post-nup, the one we drew up after he was caught texting that bartender?" I shuffled deeper into the file. "It's here, signed and notarized. Dated 3 years ago. Excellent, Zara said, and I could almost hear the grin in her voice. Read me Clause 4, Section B. I found the page. Any real estate assets acquired by Chloe Vance prior to the marriage, or any assets held by Vanguard Properties, are her separate property and not subject to division. Marcus Thorne waives all claims to said property, now and forever. Ironclad, Zara breathed. He only signed it because he felt guilty and thought you'd never leave. Look for financial statements, tax returns, anything else with his name on it. I reached toward the very back of the safe. My hand hit something that wasn't a file. It was a plain white envelope, perfectly sealed, never opened. I pulled it into the light. The return address was for the Boston IVF clinic. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stared at the envelope, and the memory hit me like a physical blow. A year ago. We'd been trying for a baby for 6 months, and nothing. I went through all the tests, blood work, ultrasounds, you name it. They said I was perfectly healthy. Then it was Marcus's turn. He whined for weeks that it was humiliating. He cancelled twice. I finally had to all but drag him to the clinic for his analysis. A week later, this envelope showed up. But that very same week, his father had a massive heart attack. The family crisis took over everything. The envelope got tossed in the safe while we dealt with the emergency. In the mess that followed, I completely forgot about it. We stopped trying soon after. His gallery was failing again, and the space between us just kept growing. Chloe? Zara's voice snapped me back. What is it? A letter, I whispered, from the fertility clinic last year. We never opened it. Open it now, Zara commanded. I ripped the seal. The papers inside felt thick and official. I unfolded the single page. It was a lab report, full of medical jargon I didn't understand. My eyes darted down the page, searching for a summary. Patient, Marcus Thorne. Date of service, October 14th, 2022. Test semen analysis. I looked for the results. Under the column for sperm count, the value was 0. Under motility, it said 0. Under morphology, the shape also 0. Then I saw the doctor's notes at the bottom of the page. Diagnosis, azoospermia. No sperm cells detected in the provided sample. Patient reports a severe case of mumps during his teenage years, likely causing permanent testicular damage and total infertility. The odds of natural conception are statistically 0. The world tilted. I fell back, clutching the report so tightly the paper crumpled. Chloe, Zara said sharply. Talk to me. He's sterile, I choked out, my voice sounding distant and strange. Zara, he can't have kids, the doctor said. It's impossible. He had mumps as a teenager. It apparently ruined everything. The line was dead quiet. I stared at the words again, letting them sink in. Marcus Thorne could not father a child. He never could. All those months I'd blamed myself, thinking my high-stress job was the problem. It was all a lie. But he didn't know. We never opened the letter. He walked through life thinking he was perfectly fine, and for the last month he'd been pretending he got my own sister pregnant. Chloe, Zara said, her voice soft but urgent. Do you understand what this means? It means Isabella is lying, I said, a hot wave of fury rising in my throat. It means she's pregnant with someone else's baby, and she's using Marcus to try and get my money. Or, Zara jumped in, her legal mind already miles ahead. It means she's not pregnant at all. I stopped breathing. Think about it, Zara went on, her words speeding up. They're desperate for cash. Marcus is broke without you. Izzy can't hold a job. They know you hate scandal. They know you'd pay a fortune to protect the family name. This pregnancy isn't about a baby, Chloe. It's a negotiation tactic. It's straight-up blackmail. My thoughts flashed back to that horrible dinner. Izzy's hand resting on her flat stomach, the way she talked about this miracle, using the imaginary baby as a shield whenever I brought up the money he owed me. If she is pregnant, Zara said, it's not his, so his claim for child support is gone. And if she's not pregnant, this is textbook fraud. Attempted extortion. I looked at the papers spread out on the floor. In one pile, my legal shield, the LLC documents for the penthouse, the loan Marcus never repaid, and the postnup he'd signed away his rights on. And in the other pile, I had my weapon, a single sheet of paper proving his affair wasn't just a betrayal of our vows, it was a biological impossibility. I picked up the fertility report. It felt heavier than any legal document. "Zara," I said, a bitter smile finally forming on my lips, "I'm holding the proof. I have the post-nup. I have his $50,000 debt. And I have medical proof that he's firing blanks. Then we're done being defensive," Zara declared. "Now we attack. You're going to meet them one more time. But not yet. Let them sweat. Let them think you're scared, trying to pull the money together. And when they're at their breaking point, you're going to walk in there and you are going to burn their whole world down." I glanced at the safe, then at the closet filled with power suits I wore to look like a real estate mogul. I didn't need a costume anymore. I had the truth. "The post-nup," I said, grabbing the document. "It says if the marriage ends because of adultery, the cheater gets nothing. No spousal support." "Exactly," Zara said. "And proving adultery is usually hard. It takes private eyes, photos, text messages. But you don't need any of that. You've got his mistress, your sister, claiming she's carrying his child. She's your proof. And the best part is their entire story is based on a lie we can shatter with a single piece of paper." I closed and locked the safe, holding the file to my chest. "They wanted a settlement," I said to the empty room. "Oh, I'm going to give them one." "Get some rest, Chloe," Zara said, "and scan me those documents. I'll start drafting the divorce papers tonight." I ended the call and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. The sun was up, casting a sharp, unforgiving light over Boston. I looked out at the skyline I helped build, the properties I developed from dirt and ambition. I move assets for a living. I orchestrate complex deals. I know how to put things together, and now I knew exactly how to tear them apart. That stunt in the restaurant was their opening shot. This file in my hands was nuclear response, and my finger was on the button. The next few days were an exercise in cold, calculated warfare, and for once, I was the one giving the orders. Zara planned the strategy like a military campaign. "Starve them out," she'd said. "Cut off their resources, let them panic. And then you call the meeting." I started with his money. I went to a new bank on my lunch hour and opened an account just for me. I had my salary redirected. I logged into our joint account, the one Marcus had a card for, and moved 95% of the funds out. Then I went to the credit card site and reported his card lost. I shut off the autopay for his streaming services, his fancy gym, and that absurd Whiskey of the Month club. The fallout was almost immediate. Tuesday at 2 p.m, my phone lit up. It was Marcus. "Hey!" Tried to get coffee and my card was declined. Must be a glitch with the bank. I made him wait an hour. "That's weird," I texted back. "I'll look into it. Swamped with meetings." At 4 o'clock he texted again. "Chloe, this is serious. I'm at the market and I can't pay. It's humiliating. Turn it back on." I didn't answer. Let him be humiliated. Let him know what it feels like to have nothing. Then Isabella tried. She came at me from a different angle entirely. She never asked for money directly. She just painted this picture of a damsel in distress who needed a financial hero. She sent these long, rambling texts about her morning sickness, how she was too dizzy to stand, how the smells in her building were making her puke. Then she'd casually mention that her rent was due in 3 days, and she was about to be evicted. "I just want our baby to be safe," she texted. "Stress is awful for the baby." "I'm so scared, Eva." I'd reply with vague non-answers. "That sounds tough. Try some ginger tea. We'll sort something out." I was stringing them along. I needed them to feel trapped. I needed their greed to turn into desperation, because desperate people get sloppy. And Lily got incredibly sloppy on Thursday afternoon. It was raining again, a cold grey mist that made the Chicago streets slick. I was in my building's lobby sitting for a courier with some contracts when the glass doors slid open. And there was Lily. She looked intentionally pathetic. She had on an oversized grey hoodie that swamped her, and she was clutching her stomach like she was holding herself together. Her hair was a mess, her eyes were red. When she saw me, she let out this loud sob that bounced off the marble floors. "Eva," she wailed, stumbling towards me. "I didn't know who else to call. Blake's at an interview, a total lie." I knew for a fact he was playing video games at his buddy's place. And I started spotting blood. "Eva, I'm scared I'm losing the baby." She grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. I need a private clinic. The emergency room wait is too long. I can't lose this baby. Please. It's $500 for an emergency scan. I just stared at her. I watched the whole performance, and as she leaned into me, burying her face in my shoulder to fake her tears, her hoodie rode up just a little, and I saw it. It was just a glimpse of skin that wasn't real skin. Right above the waistband of her pants, where her bump began, there was a clear, unnatural line. It was flesh-coloured, but the texture was wrong. It was smooth, matte, and there was a seam. My heart stopped, then kicked back in with a painful thud. It wasn't a baby bump. It was silicone. I didn't push her away. I didn't scream. I actually hugged her back, patting her shoulder with a hand that wanted to choke her. "It's okay." "Lily," I whispered, my voice thick with fake sympathy. "You poor thing. Come on upstairs. You can use the bathroom." I'll grab my purse. We went up to my apartment. I showed her to the guest bathroom. "Go on. Clean yourself up," I said. "I'll find my checkbook." The second that bathroom door clicked shut, I moved. Her purse was on the kitchen counter, right where she'd dropped it in her dramatic entrance. I opened it up. It was a complete disaster of lipstick, gum, and overdue bills. I dug through it, my hands moving quickly. At the very bottom, wadded into a little ball, was a printed-out invoice. I smoothed it out on the island. The logo at the top was from a site called Prop Bumps, realistic maternity prosthetics for film and theatre. Item, the second trimester Illusion Silicone Bessie Shade Fair. Price, $149.99. Shipping address, Lily Thomas. I just stared at it. I almost laughed. It was so ridiculous, so twisted. She wasn't just lying to me, she was wearing a costume. She was the star of a tragedy, she wrote herself. I grabbed my phone. I took a photo of the invoice. I took 3 photos, making sure the date and item were crystal clear. Then I crumpled it back up and shoved it deep into her bag, exactly how I'd found it. I walked over to the bathroom door. I could hear the faucet running, but I could also hear the rustle of fabric. I quietly peeked through the crack in the doorframe. Lily was adjusting the fake belly. She'd lifted her hoodie and was tightening a strap that went around her back. She smoothed the silicone down, checking herself in the mirror. She practiced a little pregnant waddle, then looked at her reflection and smirked. It was a cold, smug little smile that disappeared the instant she turned off the water. I jumped back, my heart hammering in my chest. I went back to the kitchen. When Lily came out, she was the victims again. "It's stopped," she whispered, "but I'm still cramping. Did you find your checkbook?" I just looked at her, at the sister I had spent my life protecting, standing there with a $150 lie strapped to her body. "I can't find it," I lied. "But listen, we can't keep doing this bit by bit. It's too much stress for you. We need to handle this for good." Her eyes lit up. "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm done fighting," I said, putting on my best defeated wife face. "You win, Lily." "I'm going to give you what you wanted. I'll give Blake the 50-50 split. We'll set up a trust fund for the baby. I want you both to be secure." Lily let out a huge sigh, her shoulders slumping with relief. "Oh, Eva, thank you." "I knew you'd come around. You're so good." "Let's meet tomorrow night," I said. The Copper Finch. 7 o'clock. "Tell Blake to bring the divorce papers he already printed out. We'll sign everything. We'll celebrate your new beginning." "Okay," she said, just beaming. She hugged me again, pressing that fake rubber belly into me. "You're the best sister in the entire world." "I know," I said. "Go home and get some rest. Don't even worry about the clinic. We'll get you the best doctors money can buy starting tomorrow." She practically danced out the door. Her fake miscarriage cured by the promise of a big payout. I waited until the door closed. Then I called Nora. "I've got the proof," I said. "She's wearing a fake pregnancy belly. I have the receipt. I have pictures." "Oh, this is going to be spectacular," Nora said, her voice full of dark excitement. "You're ready, Eva? The trap is officially set." That night, I put together a large envelope and filled it with everything: the fake belly invoice, the fertility report, the post-nup. When I sealed it, the weight in my hands didn't feel like paper. It felt like revenge. Nora's what played in my head. Let them talk first. Let them dig their own grave. Let them get comfortable in their greed. Make them say it. Make them claim the baby is his. Make them demand the money. And then you bring down the hammer. I slept like a rock that night for the first time in 3 weeks. I didn't dream about drowning. I dreamed of a guillotine, and I was the one holding the rope. The copperfinch was ready. The stage was set. And my dear husband and sister were about to walk into a show they would never, ever forget. The hands on the old clock above the bar hit 7 o'clock on the dot when the heavy wooden doors swung open. I was sitting in the exact same booth, wearing the exact same dark green dress from the night my world fell apart. I thought about changing, maybe into a power suit to show this was just business, but I decided against it. I wanted them to see the woman they thought they'd broken. I wanted them to see the silk dress was unwrinkled, and the woman wearing it was made of steel. They walked in, and the change in them was disgusting. 3 weeks ago, they were nervous, fidgeting like kids who'd just been caught stealing. Tonight, they strode in with the confidence of lottery winners on their way to cash in. Blake wore his best navy blazer, the one I bought him for our anniversary, and he'd even polished his shoes. He guided Lily with a protective hand on her back, parading her through the restaurant as if she were carrying royalty instead of a $149 prop. Lily looked radiant. Her hair was in a soft, motherly bun, and she wore a flowing dress that highlighted the prosthetic bump. She played the part perfectly. She was the glowing, fertile mother-to-be, and I was the cold, barren career woman being tossed aside. They got to the table. Blake pulled out Lily's chair for her with a dramatic flair. He waited until she was settled, even adjusting her napkin before he finally sat down and faced me. "Eva," he said with a serious nod, "thanks for agreeing to this. I know this isn't easy, but I'm glad we can do this civilized." He flagged down the waiter before I could even speak. "Water for the lady," Blake said, pointing to Lily. "Room temperature, if you please. Cold water bothers her stomach. And bring a Pinot Noir for my wife." He paused on the word wife, just enjoying how awkward it was. He was playing the part of the good guy, the man forced to make hard choices for his new, growing family. "I don't want any wine," I said, my voice perfectly level. "I want to hear the numbers." Blake smiled. It was a tight, patronizing look that said he forgave my rudeness because I was just being emotional. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thin folder. It felt flimsy compared to the thick legal envelope on the seat next to me. "Okay," Liam said, folding his hands. "We've thought long and hard about what's fair. We want you happy, Chloe, truly, but we have to be practical for the baby's sake." He opened his briefcase and pushed a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a budget, a laughably simple and wildly optimistic budget. "The plan is straightforward," Liam said, tapping the paper. "We sell the Soma loft. The market's insane. We split the profit, 50-50. That leaves you with a solid chunk of cash to find a smaller place, maybe a condo near your office. And it gives Sophie and me enough for a down payment on a house out in the suburbs, something with a yard." I just stared at the page. He wanted half of the property my company owned, a place he'd never invested a single dollar into. "And as for your liquid assets," Liam went on, his growing bolder when I didn't erupt, "we know you have the investment portfolio, the startup shares, all of it. Since we got married while you were building all that, I figure a 50% split is fair, but to show I'm being reasonable, I'll take 40%. I'm willing to leave you the majority." He paused, clearly expecting me to thank him. When I said nothing, he coughed. "However," he added, "since I'll be the main provider while Sophie is with the baby, and my real estate commissions are unpredictable, we're asking for spousal support. Just for 3 years, $10,000 a month, until the baby's in daycare and my income stabilizes. $10,000 a month. He was asking me to pay him a salary to sleep with my own sister." Sophie reached out. She didn't dare touch me this time, probably feeling the sheer rage coming off me in waves. Instead, she just put a hand on her heart, her eyes wide and pleading. "Chloe, please," she said, her voice shaky with fake emotion. "I know it seems like a lot, but you remember our childhood. You remember that tiny apartment back in Texas? How Mom and Dad were always scraping by. You don't want that for this baby. You don't want your own nephew growing up scared the power's going to be shut off. She paused, letting the guilt twist. You've always been the strong one, our family's rock. You've got that huge career. You have Nexus Innovations. You could make this money back in a year, easy. We can't. We just need a fresh start. If you won't do it for us, think about Mom and Dad. If this divorce gets ugly and goes to court, it would destroy them. You know how fragile Mom's health is. Do you really want to put her in the hospital? It was a perfect piece of emotional blackmail. She was using my success as a weapon against me, arguing that because I could survive this, I was obligated to let them tear me apart. And besides, Sophie added, her hand moving down to the silicone lump stuffed under her sundress, the stress is terrible for the baby. The doctor said with my condition, I need total calm. I'm already high risk. I felt the baby kick for the first time yesterday when we were fighting about money. I can't put him through that again. I froze. My hand, which was about to pick up my water glass, just stopped. That baby bump, it was the Everly bump, 8-month model. I'd seen it online just last week when I was buying a real gift for my pregnant friend Sarah. It's a prop, a $150 prop from Amazon. She wasn't high risk. She wasn't even pregnant. The entire thing, the morning sickness, the doctor's appointments, the sudden cravings, it was all an act. A complete and total lie designed to justify this insane demand for my money. She had just admitted, in her rush to play the victim, that the core of their entire story was a fraud. She was so lost in the lie about her fake pregnancy symptoms, she forgot I'd seen that exact prop online. I glanced over at Liam. He was clueless. He was too busy staring at the numbers on his proposal, probably already picking out a new sports car. So that's our offer, Liam said, looking up with a sad, pathetic smile. We settle this tonight. We sign a basic agreement. You agree to sell the loft and pay the support, and in return, we keep this private. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low whisper. Think about your reputation, Chloe. You're the CEO now. Nexus Innovations is a public company. They don't want scandals. If we fight this, if this turns into a messy divorce with accusations flying around, it all becomes public record. It would be a disaster for you. We're offering you a way out. We're offering to protect your career. There it was. The final threat, wrapped in a layer of fake concern. He wasn't just demanding my money. He was threatening to burn down my entire life if I refused. I looked at them both. My husband, who was either a fool or a willing accomplice to this fraud. My sister, wearing a cheap prop and using our mother's health as a bargaining chip. I saw two people so consumed by greed, they had no idea they'd just walked straight into a trap. They were waiting for me to break down. They expected me to start crying. They expected me to pull out my phone and call my lawyer to start negotiating. They were waiting for Chloe, the one who always fixed everything, to start arranging the terms of her own destruction. I picked up my wine glass. I took a slow, deliberate sip. It was cold, sharp. I swallowed, feeling a pleasant burn. I set the glass back down on the table with a soft, final click. I didn't say a thing. I just reached down to the chair beside me and picked up that thick, heavy envelope. I put it on the table between us. It landed with the same solid thud as their first demand had weeks ago. Only this time it wasn't a problem. It was the solution. You're right, Liam, I said, my voice quiet, almost calm. We should get everything out in the open, and we should definitely review the paperwork. I pushed the envelope toward them. But before we discuss splitting my company's assets, I said, a cold smile finally reaching my eyes, I think we should talk about what's in this envelope first. And then, I think we need to talk about what's currently stuffed inside Sophie's dress. Their smiles evaporated. The air in the room just went dead. I watched all the colour drain from Liam's face as he stared at the thick packet, realising this wasn't a counteroffer. It was an ambush. I reached into the envelope. I took my time. I moved with the slow, calculated calm of a surgeon, choosing the right tool for a very precise incision. The restaurant hummed around us with happy chatter. But at our table, the silence was absolute. It was the kind of heavy, crushing silence you feel in a courtroom just moments before the judge reads the verdict. I pulled out the first document. It was a thick stack of papers, stapled together with crisp, sharp corners. I placed it on the table right in front of Liam, smoothing the cover page with my hand. "Do you recognize this?" I asked. Liam squinted at the paper. He seemed confused. His brow wrinkled as he read the title, printed in bold capital letters. "Post-nuptial property agreement," he read aloud, the words sounding like dirt in his mouth. He glanced up at me, a nervous little laugh catching in his throat. "What is this, Chloe? We never signed a post-nup. You mentioned it one time years ago, but we never did it." "Flip to the last page, Liam," I said. My voice was quiet. It didn't need to be loud. It sliced right through the tension in the air. He fumbled with the pages, his hands beginning to shake. He got to the signature page, and there it was, in blue ink, his own signature. It was a messy, rushed scrawl, but it was absolutely his. And next to it, a date from 3 years ago. "Does that date mean anything to you?" I asked, taking another sip of water. "Allow me to jog your memory. It was October 22nd. It was 2 in the morning. You called me from a holding cell at the police station because you'd wrapped your brand new sports car around a streetlight after a client dinner. You were drunk. You were terrified. You were looking at a DUI and a lawsuit that would have completely ruined you." Sophie's eyes went wide. She stared at Liam, who was suddenly fascinated by the tablecloth. "You got a DUI?" she whispered. "You told me your driving record was perfect." "I fixed it," I said, ignoring her. "I called the best lawyer in San Francisco. I paid the city $10,000 out of my own pocket to cover the damages, so they wouldn't press felony charges. I saved your career. I saved your license. But I told you right then, Liam, that my help wasn't free." I tapped the document. "I told you that if I was going to use my money to fix your disasters, I had to protect my assets from your future mistakes. My attorney drafted this. She insisted you get your own lawyer. Remember David Chen? The man I paid $600 an hour to represent you. Just to ensure you could never claim I forced you into it." "I thought that was just for the insurance company," Liam stammered. The sweat was starting to bead on his forehead. I was hungover. I was panicking. "You just shoved papers in my face and said I had to sign them if I wanted to get out of there. I had no idea I was signing my rights away. Being ignorant of the law isn't a defense, especially when your own lawyer is sitting next to you explaining every single clause," I said. "But let's review what you actually signed, shall we?" I reached across the table, flipping the document to page 4. I tapped my finger on a paragraph highlighted in yellow. Clause 7, Section A. I read it aloud. "The party identified as the husband acknowledges the property on Beacon Hill, Boston, held by Seaport Holdings LLC, is the sole and separate property of the wife. The husband waives any and all claims to its equity, value, or residence in the case of a legal separation or divorce." I looked up. Liam's face had lost all its colour. It looked like a cheap grey statue. "And here," I said, turning to the next page, "is Clause 9, stating all investment accounts, stocks, and retirement funds in the wife's name, or from her work at Orion Vanguard Capital, remain her separate property. The husband confirms he made no financial contribution to these accounts and gives up all rights to them." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "So, Liam, that 50-50 split you just talked about, that financial future for your new family, it's not real. You signed it all away 3 years ago to avoid felony fraud charges." Mia made a sound like a choked gasp. She ripped the document out from under Liam's hand. Her eyes shot across the text, hunting for some loophole, any mistake that could save her payday. "This is insane," she hissed, her voice getting higher. "This can't be legal. We have rights. We're having a baby. Read Clause 12. "Mia," I said, pointing to the bottom of the page in her hand. "It's my favourite part." She looked down, her lips moving while she read the legal words. "In the event of infidelity causing the end of the marriage, the cheating party forfeits all claims to any spousal support. I filed for divorce this morning," I said calmly, "uncontested on the grounds of adultery. I have the hotel receipts. I have your confession from 3 weeks ago, and now I have this document." I glanced at Liam. who was slumped in his chair like a man watching his own house burn to the ground. "So this is your new reality," I said, my voice dropping to a calm, terrifyingly casual tone. "You leave this marriage with precisely what you came with. Your car, which isn't even paid off yet, your clothes, and your ridiculous watch. That's it. No apartment money, no stock payouts, no $5,000 a month." Liam looked up, his eyes glassy. "Chloe, you can't. I have nowhere to live. I don't have any savings. What am I supposed to do?" "You should have thought of that before you slept with my sister," I said. "Oh, but I'm not finished." I pulled a second thinner document from my envelope. "Remember the loan agreement?" I asked. "The one for the $50,000 I paid to clear your gambling debts before our wedding, and the $30,000 for that failed crypto venture? Plus 5 years of interest." I slid the paper across the table. It stopped right on top of the post-nup. According to this contract, which is also legally binding, those weren't gifts. They were callable loans. That means I can demand you pay me back in full anytime I want. I leaned in, my face just inches from his. "I'm demanding it now." "Liam, the total with interest is over $110,000. I can sue you for it. I can garnish your wages for the next 20 years. I can take your car. I can make sure you never get approved for a loan again." The silence that followed felt heavy enough to break bones. Liam was physically shaking now. Mia stared at him with a look of pure, unfiltered horror. It wasn't love. It wasn't concern for the father of her child. She was looking at him like a failed startup she was about to liquidate. "You're broke," Mia whispered, the words hanging in the air, sharp and ugly. "You have nothing." "Chloe, please," Liam begged, ignoring her. He reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. "I can't pay that. You know I can't. Have some mercy. We were married for 5 years. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It meant everything to me," I said, my voice soft. "That's why I paid off your debts. That's why I saved you from prosecution. That's why I built a life for us. But it obviously meant nothing to you." I sat back, smoothing out my dress. "However," I said, letting the word linger, "I am a reasonable person. I could be talked into forgiving the entire debt. I could be talked into letting you walk away with just your clothes and no lawsuits chasing you." Liam's head snapped up. "How? I'll do anything. Just tell me what to do. Sign the divorce papers exactly as Ms. Albright wrote them." I said, "You walk away with absolutely nothing. You never try to contact me again. You admit to the affair so the divorce goes through immediately. Do all that, and I will rip up this loan agreement." "You'll be broke, Liam. But you'll be free. That's the only deal you're getting from me." Liam nodded so hard his head bobbed. I'll sign it right now." "Where is it, Liam?" Mia shrieked. She grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. "Are you an idiot? You're just giving up? What about our future? What about the baby? You promised me. You promised you would take care of us." Liam turned on her, and for the first time I saw that vicious side of him aimed at someone else. He threw her hand off his arm. "Shut up, Mia!" he snapped. "Are you not listening? She owns everything. The townhouse is in a trust. I get nothing. If I don't sign this, she'll sue me for over $100,000. I'll be bankrupt. I can't buy you a house. I can barely buy you a coffee." "You coward!" Mia yelled, no longer whispering. People at other tables were starting to look. "You said you had it all figured out. You said she was weak. You said she would pay us off just to make it go away." "She played us," Liam hissed back. "She's had this planned for years. This was always a trap. I just watched them." I watched their supposed epic love disintegrate in less than 5 minutes as soon as the money disappeared. It was pathetic. It was satisfying. But it wasn't done. I picked up my wine glass, swirling the deep red liquid. I looked at Mia, her face now bright red with fury and panic. She was realizing her winning lottery ticket was actually a worthless piece of paper. She was realizing she was now stuck with a broke, spineless man and a lie that was about to get very, very expensive. I cleared my throat. They both shut up and stared at me, remembering exactly who was in charge. "You two seem stressed," I said quietly, "and I get it. It's a shock when your retirement plan gets cancelled, but you might want to save some of that energy." I reached into my envelope one last time. "Because," I said, My hand closing around the final document, the medical report, and the photos of the prosthetic pregnancy bump. That was only the first secret. We haven't even gotten to the baby yet. I saw Mia's eyes go wide. I saw the blood drain from her face, leaving her looking like a ghost. She knew, in that single moment, she knew that I knew. And believe me, I said, pulling the papers out and setting them face down on the table, my hand resting on top like a lid on a box of snakes. This next part is so much worse. I kept my hand on the final stack of papers, feeling the cool paper on my palm. The restaurant was warm, full of the scent of roasted garlic and wine, but the air at our table felt like absolute zero. Liam was still reeling from the financial hit, his face pale and clammy with sweat. Mia was just glaring at him, her chest rising and falling, trapped between her own greed and the fact that her partner in crime was useless. "You said there was another half," Liam whispered, his voice shaky. He looked like a man who had already been shot and was just waiting to hit the floor. "What else could there possibly be? You've already taken all the money. You took the house. I took the money because it was my money," I corrected him softly. "But this part is about what you think is yours." I flipped the stack of papers over. The top page wasn't a contract. It was a medical report. I slid it across the table, pushing it past the vase of flowers that Liam had so confidently ordered. It stopped right in front of him. "Do you recognize the name, Liam?" I asked. "The Boston IVF Clinic. We went there last year. You complained that the magazines in the waiting room were old. You complained the nurse was too cheerful." Liam stared at the paper. His eyes jumped back and forth, trying to understand the words. "They never sent the results," he muttered. "My dad got sick. We just forgot." "They didn't send them to you," I said, "but they sent them to me. They've been sitting in my safe for a year. I opened them 3 days ago." I leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper that felt louder than a shout. "Read the diagnosis, Liam. Read the final line." He read it. I saw his lips form the word, zoospermia, complete absence of sperm, sterile. "The doctor noted your severe case of the mumps when you were 15, I continued, reciting the report from memory. He wrote that the damage was irreversible. He wrote that your chances of having a child naturally weren't just low. They were zero, statistically impossible. I sat back, letting that sink in. "So," I said, turning my eyes slowly to Mia. She was frozen solid, her hand gripping her wine glass so tightly I thought the stem would snap. "That brings us to a very interesting question. If Liam is sterile, and has been since he was a teenager, then whose baby is that, Mia?" The silence that followed was heavy enough to swallow the entire world. Blake glanced up from the paper, his eyes stretched wide. He looked at me, utterly lost, then his head swiveled toward Lily, slow and robotic. The truth crashed over him in waves, first confusion, then denial, and finally a rage so pure it twisted his face. "You said it was mine," Blake whispered, his voice trembling. "You swore! You showed me the dates! You called it a miracle! This is a mistake!" Lily just stammered, her face turning a blotchy red. "That test is wrong. Doctors are wrong all the time. It's your baby, Blake. I feel it. It has your eyes." "It has eyes?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "That's impressive for a fetus that's supposedly just a few months old. I mean, I know it's yours." "But Lily, you don't have to lie anymore, because we both know there is no baby." I reached for the next paper in the stack and slammed it down on the medical report. It was the invoice. The print was big and bold. Propbumps.com. The second trimester illusion silicone, $149.99. "I found this in your purse," I said coldly, "while you were in my bathroom practicing your pregnant waddle. And this," I laid down the photos grainy, high-contrast shots of the silicone ridge peeking over her waistband, the unnatural plastic shine of the skin. "And finally," I said, dropping the last piece of paper, a screenshot I took of a notification on her phone when she'd left it on the table. "A text to your friend Sarah." I read it aloud, my voice completely flat. "He's so dumb. The second she signs the papers and wires the money, I'm staging a miscarriage. I'll just say it was the stress. Then we split the cash and I'm off to Cabo. My life is finally starting." Blake made a noise like a dying animal. He shot up from his chair so fast it crashed to the floor. He stared at the invoice. He stared at the pictures. He stared at the woman he'd torched his marriage for. "It's fake," he choked out. He lunged forward, and before Lily could react, he grabbed the front of her flowery dress. "No, don't you touch me!" Lily shrieked, swatting at his hands, but it was too late. He'd already felt it, that hard, rubbery resistance of the fake stomach. He recoiled like he'd just touched a hot stove. "You're wearing a costume," Blake shouted, his voice cracking. "You're not pregnant, you're just a fat liar! I did it for us!" Lily screamed back, all pretense gone. Her face was a mask of pure fury. "We needed the money. You're broke. You're a loser who sells used cars. How else were we supposed to get her money? I had to make a plan because you're too stupid to think of one." "You ruined my life," Blake roared back. "I left my wife for you. I signed away everything because I thought I was going to be a father." "You ruined your own life," Lily spat. "You're the one who cheated. You just wanted an ego boost because Eva was too successful for you." They were just screaming at each other now, right in the middle of this fancy restaurant, throwing insults back and forth while every other diner just stared. A panicked waiter was rushing over. I just watched them. I watched the two people who plotted to ruin me now tear each other to shreds. It was nasty, it was loud, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I cleared my throat. It wasn't a loud noise, but it sliced right through their screaming. They both froze, panting, and stared at me. It was like they suddenly remembered I was the one holding all the cards. "Sit down," I said. They hesitated for a second, but they sat. Blake dragged his chair back up. Lily smoothed her dress over the fake bump, looking trapped and furious. "Here is how this is going to end," I said, folding my hands on the table. "I have enough evidence right here to send you both to prison. This is fraud. This is attempted extortion. This is a conspiracy to commit theft. If I go to the police, you go to jail. If I take this to the auto group, Blake, you'll never sell a car in this city again. And Lily, if I show this to Mom and Dad, well, the shock might actually kill Mom, but you will be disowned." Lily's face went white. All the fight just vanished from her eyes. "Eva, please, don't tell Mom, please. I don't want to destroy the family," I said. "Believe it or not, I'm not cruel. I just want out." I slid the divorce papers over to Blake. I handed him a pen. "Sign them," I ordered. "Uncontested divorce. You admit to adultery. You waive all rights to my money. You waive alimony. You acknowledge your debt to me is forgiven for a clean break." Blake snatched the pen. He didn't even read it. He scribbled his name so hard the ink bled through the page. He shoved the papers back at me, his hands shaking. "And you," I said, turning to my sister. "You are going to disappear. You're going home tonight. You're packing your bags, and you're moving back to Ohio. You'll tell Mom and Dad the city wasn't for you, and in a few weeks you'll tell them you had a miscarriage, a natural one. You will not blame me. You will not blame stress. You'll say it just happened. If I hear one word," I continued, my voice turning to ice, "if I hear that you've asked me for a dime, or used my name for a credit card, or told anyone a sob story about me, I will release these photos. I will send this invoice to everyone we know. I will make sure the entire world sees the receipt for that rubber stomach you're wearing right now." Lily nodded, crying for real this time, the pathetic tears of a con artist who finally got caught. "I promise! I swear, Eva." I gathered the papers and checked Blake's signature. It was good. I put everything back in the envelope, the post-nup, the report, the invoice, the photos. I snapped it shut. I stood up. "One last thing, Lily," I said, looking down at her. She looked so small and pathetic in that expensive maternity dress. "If you ever actually have a child one day," I said, my voice quiet but sharp, "I hope you learn how to be a mother. Because a real mother protects her child. She doesn't use them as a weapon, and she sure as hell doesn't invent one to steal from her own sister. Don't teach your future kids that love is a business deal. That's the only free lesson you'll ever get from me." I picked up my purse and the envelope. "The bill is yours," I said to Blake. "I'm guessing you can't pay it, but that's no longer my problem." I turned and walked away. "Eva!" Blake called out, his voice desperate and scared. "Eva, wait! How am I supposed to get home? You took the car!" I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I walked right past the hostess station, past the valet who opened the door for me. I stepped out into the sharp Chicago night. The air was cold and clean. It smelled like rain and city streets. I walked to my car, my heels making a steady, rhythmic click on the sidewalk. I unlocked the door, tossed the heavy envelope on the passenger seat. It just sat there, a stack of paper that used to feel like the weight of the world. Now it was just legal junk to be filed. I started at the engine. The dashboard glowed, warm and bright. I put the car in drive and pulled into the flow of traffic. As I merged onto the expressway, the city lights blurring past me, I took a deep breath. My lungs filled with air, and for the first time in 3 weeks, maybe for the first time in 10 years, there was no pressure. There was no weight. I was alone, and I was finally free. Thank you for listening to my story. That was a long road for Eva, and I'm so happy you stayed to see her get justice. I would love to know where you're all listening from. Drop your city or country in the comments and tell me what you would have done in Eva's situation. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Zoe Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and ring the notification bell to help this story find more people who need to see karma delivered. See you in the next video.